Man in America, the voice. Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holehouse. There are a lot of big chess moves going on right now, especially if you look at the geopolitical map, looking at Trump talking about bringing Canada in, bringing Greenland in. We have the recent news, which has really made a lot of people uneasy, and rightfully so, about Trump putting America back into the British Commonwealth, which is, well, didn't we fight against that back in 1776 when we said we don't want to be part of that and we don't want to be ruled by the British crown? And so there's a lot of stuff to unpack around that. Like, is Trump playing some sort of 10D chess? Is he being misled? How do we make sense of this? And there's so much more to even unpack surrounding this. And so joining us today is Matthew Ehret, a guy that when I talk to him, I'm thinking, I need to read more books. Like, I think this guy reads, like, the amount of books I read in a year, he reads in like 3 days. Like, he's just a fountain of knowledge. But in today's show, we're going to be diving into not just the surface of what's happening right now, but deep into 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, and how to see what was happening in biblical times is actually affecting what's happening right now. We're going to go into the global surveillance state. We're going to take a look at Israel and whether Israel is controlled by the British crown and the banking system. We're also going to be talking about the new leader, Carney, of Canada and what that means. But then even taking a look at the threat of a technocratic state. Elon Musk, the amount of power that he's been wielding, is he who we think he is? The optimistic part of me wants to think so, but when I look at his past and his grandfather and the Technocratic Party in Canada, there's a lot of questions that I have. And so Matt will be taking us down a deep dive into this. I will warn you ahead of time that this is going to be a very heady discussion. This is not going to be a little 20-minute soundbite where everything makes sense. But actually, that's not why you watch this show. I think that you like this show because I go into these deep dives and I ask questions, and I'm not happy with someone telling me that, oh, things are the way they are right now because of this event that happened 10 years ago. Like, I want to know what's the event that happened 300 years ago that set the course for the event that happened 10 years ago that's now controlling our current reality. And that's just where my mind goes. I'm not a surface kind of guy. I like going straight to the heart of things. And that's what we're going to be doing in this discussion. I hope you can follow along. I think you will. I stop them periodically and say, well, hold on, let me make sure I'm on the right page here, because I want to make sure that I'm understanding this information. And it's pretty wild. I will tell you that, so he's in Thailand right now, so his video signal is a little bit choppy. The audio is actually good, except for a few tiny parts, so it's a really easy interview to watch and listen to, but I'm just warning you ahead of time that his video signal is not perfect, which that's just what happens when I'm interviewing guests around the world. And okay, finally, before we jump in though, I just want to thank those of you that are watching on Rumble. We're supporting free speech. And just a reminder that every show that we do is also a podcast. So maybe if you're watching video, we also put everything out in podcasts. So if you go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever it is, you can find the show there, and make sure that you subscribe to those channels as well. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the interview with Matthew Ehret. Mr. Matt Ehret, it's been quite a while, but it's great to have you back on the show, man. Thank you for joining us.
Yay, Seth. It's a pleasure to join you. I always love our little chats, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. I wouldn't really call them little chats. They tend to be pretty, maybe they're little in ease, but we tend to dive into some pretty deep and far-reaching historical things, which tends to be where I find that your mind is, which is great, because that's one of my favorite places to go. Is I hate the hey, let's talk about the bread and circuses or what's going on in the Kabuki theater today. I want to go into like, okay, who owns the puppets, who made the strings, where are the hands at? So this will be fun.
I should have said, like, I really appreciate our full-blown deep dives into ancient history and metaphysics.
There we go.
And multi-layered contextual dynamics. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there we go. Great. The impetus for me reaching out to you was these recent events about Trump kind of talking openly about rejoining the British Commonwealth. Now, here's a great unbiased article of someone that absolutely has no DEI affiliation that says Trump open to U.S. joining British Commonwealth, reinforcing his policies that oppress Black Americans. So there's one article I found on this just for reference, but another one, which Newsweek, Donald Trump suffers MAGA backlash over Commonwealth proposal. Hell no. So obviously, one of the big themes of, yeah, I'd say really the much more contemporary conservative movement that got Trump into office is this idea of returning back to 1776, whether it's through ending the Fed, kind of really reducing the federal, kind of powers, going back to the original republic that this nation was founded as. And so the idea of joining the Commonwealth obviously goes against that. So why don't you, because this is really your area, you understand a lot about the British Crown and its influence. So I guess first walk us through what happened recently with Trump and this idea to rejoin the Commonwealth, and then I'll let you just kind of take us into this deep dive from there.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. And yeah, I'll do my best to try to make as transparent and easily accessible the general dynamic that I'm concerned about, that I think every American and Canadian and British subject, and I say subject, not citizen for a reason, should be aware of when considering the implications of what's been going down over the past week, especially since it was made formally, it seems formally known that King Charles III has made the offer to Donald Trump to bring the United States into the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth, as an associate member, which would, it seems to run contrary, like you just pointed out, to the desire of the base of the entirety of MAGA, which were organized around the idea, like you said, of making America again, in a proper sense, not making America Great Britain again, but really making America great again. And it seems like instead of returning to 1776, this runs the danger of potentially falling into a trap. And I'll say trap because I do want to give Trump the benefit of the doubt that he's perhaps just being led by dishonest, shady advisors, maybe, into returning America to 1775 again, which would not be a step forward for human civilization. Since I believe, honestly, as a Canadian, in my research of why the hell there is such a thing as Canada to begin with, it's because largely we failed to accept the Ben Franklin challenge of 1776 when Ben Franklin was up here working like heck to try to get Canadians to recognize that our only chance for a viable future was to become the 14th colony to sign the Declaration of Independence, to say to Great Britain that we are going to form a new type of government founded upon natural law, the consent of the governed. And because we failed and remained enmeshed within the Crown's system of global controls as part of the worldwide empire that was the City of London, that was the global Freemasonic operations around the United Grand Lodge, which was the mother lodge of all other subsidiary lodges, that we deprived ourselves of having a real proper future that we were destined to have. And instead, we as Canadians have now been subjected to over 250 years of false stories about us being a pseudo country founded upon not any battles for liberty or freedom, but rather our subservience to the British Crown, which we knew, unlike our, English speaking brethren south of the border, that if we just had patience, that her sometimes overbearing but otherwise concerned, loving, Queen Victoria spirit was going to give us the freedoms that we longed for, which she did. It's such a crazy, stupid psyop, I would say. It's a sacred national myth that has no bearing in truth. And in fact, when you start, and I think I've done as good of a job as I could over the past 15 years of research, and I've published 4 books on the untold history of Canada. That's volume 1 to volume 4, where I tried to reconstruct as best as I could a better understanding of the story of Canada as a failed nation state and always used as a chess piece within the British Empire's great game, often as a destabilizing tool against American Republican efforts at some times, and at other times just keep Canada as a wedge to prevent the development of a U.S.-Russian friendship, which has also been the purpose that Canada has served the British Crown over the centuries. So here I see Trump playing at least in words. Maybe he's playing around and he doesn't mean what he's saying, but at least in words, I'll take it for now that he's genuine, that he's entertaining the possibility of rejoining the British Crown. That I see that as a super dangerous trap. And I sent you a slide on that note, which I think might illustrate my point pretty well, which is, well, I sent you two slides, one of which is featuring two maps, one of the British Empire of 1929 or 19, right, that one. Yeah. And those are two maps. One on that one you're showing right to your audience right there is the British Empire as it was in the 1920s. At one of its largest scales, it represented about 23% of the world's surface area. It was not just military controls, but it was principally banking controls. As I said, the city of London, then as today, was the nerve center of global banking, offshore illegal transactions, especially in offshore accounts, drug money laundering. The entirety of the Opium Wars was basically created an organized crime syndicate in Asia. Specifically through the British operations in Hong Kong and Shanghai, the epicenter of the Hong Kong, Shanghai, Hongsheng Bank of Commerce, which to this very day, even more recently, I think a decade ago, was caught laundering hundreds of billions of dollars of global drug money. So it never stopped the thing that it was designed to do in 1865. And it's a London-centered bank. That map is useful to just get across the nature of the British Empire that we were told disappeared after World War II. Whereas I would say in reality, when you look at actually happened, I think there was no disappearing of the British Empire that allowed its colonies to go free and become independent. And now it's an American empire. I think that story is a false story that was designed to cause our minds to get very gelatinous and weak about the fact that the empire never disappeared. And if you go to the next image to the left of that one, so you'll see the map of the British Commonwealth. If you could zoom out. Yeah, that one right there. So to this day, I find that what we are told is the British Commonwealth, which still has the Crown City of London as the dominant control mechanism, along with a Privy Council within various parts, the Privy Council of Canada, the Privy Council of Britain, and various other parts. You also have the Five Eyes security apparatus, which is an intelligence dragnet around the GCHQ, the NSA, the Canadian RCMP and CSIS, the Australian intelligence, as well as South Africa. It's a centrally controlled global intelligence dragnet that was set up really in the wake of World War II. And that's another aspect of this global system. And the Commonwealth today represents about 56 countries. It's still about 22 or 21% of the world's surface area. Some of the most valuable resources are controlled through the British Commonwealth. I would say also the world's drug money laundering, terrorist financing occurs through the Cayman Islands, British Cayman Islands, British offshore banking. Recently, Toronto Dominion Bank, which is one of the biggest banks in Canada, the big five banks, has been caught and was fined $3 billion for its collusion with Mexican Colombian cartels in its offshore accounts at laundering immense amounts of money that we know where it goes, and it's been proven where it goes. So this is not a new game. It's been going back for well over 120, 130 years. And it's a global system of control. And I would say this is what John F. Kennedy, in large measure, was resisting when he was murdered, was trying to bring America out of this type of influence and into its truer foundations as a constitutional republic, which would look to other nations to assist them to stand on their own 2 feet and to help themselves develop, not to give them fish so that they can eat for a day, but to really help them learn how to fish. And that's what we saw with JFK's work with Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, with his efforts in Congo with Patrice Lumumba, and many other South American countries that had been colonialized. And he was looking at all of these countries making deals to say, okay, let's give you the best of American experience in creating entrepreneurialism, heavy industrial progress, and let's provide you the means so that you can have these things too, so that you can become sovereigns that have economic self-direction and can negotiate with us based on equal partner status instead of being a secondary or tertiary slave state, as the empires of the old world had enforced for centuries. So that had to be undone. And instead, this strange thing took over controls of the U.S. apparatus.
Gold has surged 46% in less than a year, doubling the gains of the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. But this isn't just another rally. Global reserves are shifting, exposing cracks in the monetary system. Investors are losing confidence in paper gold and demanding physical metal, creating a massive gap between gold owed and gold available. But this isn't about how institutions broke another system. It's about how you can profit from it. Right now, Noble Gold Investments has a limited supply of investment-grade gold bars and coins available. As banks scramble to fulfill their obligations, pushing gold prices higher, you can profit. Smart investors are already moving into physical gold. Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for you to do the same. And right now, when you make a qualified investment, Noble Gold will add a free 10th ounce gold coin to your order. Don't wait until it's too late. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 now and turn their panic into your profit. Again, that's goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906. You'll find that information in the description for the show as well.
Now, I think with Trump, Donald Trump's coming into power has provided a lot of self-examination. We have the JFK files that have been made, increasingly public. I think there's still some that are not publicly yet. There's still a lot of material in there that's been blacked out, but at the very least, there's some spiritual self-examination about what the hell we allowed to take over our society with the CIA, a lot of these other nasty interests over the last few generations. So that's good, and I hope that Trump is an honest actor. But as we've been alluding to, his choice to tell King Charles that I love you and that I love this idea of America joining the Commonwealth as an associate member. We could stop that share if you want, by the way, but
Sure.
Actually, is, I think, a super dangerous trap, and one which unfortunately plays into.
Oh, so there you go. Your video had frozen for a few minute or so, but your audio has been perfect. So okay, you can continue though.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I think it does unfortunately play into the type of program that was laid out by the godfather of what became the European Union back in the early 1920s. His name was Count or Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi. And a lot of people are aware of the Kalergi Plan. You probably are too, as part of one small aspect of the broader vision of Kalergi. And I think the thing that's become permitted to be popular in modern society, or in the conspiracy research realm that we tend to navigate in, is his efforts or his discussion about homogenizing, destroying the character of sovereign nation states by opening borders and homogenizing all cultures into a blob. That's an aspect of it, but I think I would say that's what's popularly discussed. But I think what's even more important than that is the fact that's often missed, is that he is the governing mind behind what became the European Union before anyone else. And even the flag itself, which you could show maybe. I sent you a slide of the Count Coudenhove-Kalergi's face, and yeah, there you go. That's him on the right with Otto von Habsburg, the heir of the Habsburg dynasty. Nominally, that dynasty was dismantled after World War I, but the leading families that were dominant for centuries within the Habsburg architecture did not disappear. We're talking multi-generational, ancient families with villas, palazzos, castles, huge estates, hugely powerful, inbred families. They didn't disappear. They were just simply told, you're going to have a new type of role to play for it, period, before you gain ascendancy again. And Otto von Habsburg was supposed to be the grand emperor of that Habsburg Empire, of the Austro-Hungarian Empire that was taken down. But he became sort of the student and largely the heir of Coudenhove-Kalergi's legacy after World War I. So that's him with the mustache.
Okay.
Now,
Actually, I have a
Kalergi,
quick question,
yeah.
just to just kind of
Mm,
piece
mhm,
some of these things together that makes sense to me. Okay, so one thing that I've gone through in this just kind of diving down the rabbit
mm,
holes is you think, okay, who's running the show, right? Who's at the top of the pyramid? And it's not easy, right? And I think you even find that, oh, there's like the 13 families, but there's a families behind those families, right? And it's something that is very difficult. Now, one question I do have in looking at all of this is that, and this is a complex question, but maybe you have a way of simplifying it, is when I look at the threats to America, I look at who's trying to control America, I see that the CCP, which I've studied extensively, they have their own plans. They've got their 100-year march. They've got there's been leaked speeches. So I look at them as a threat. There's a lot of infiltration, but from them. Also, a lot of what you can see is that a lot of America, and even going back in the JFK files, you see Israel is a very common nation, right? Israel Mossad that seems to be working very closely with the CIA, but also there's some people that want to say, oh, everything is Israel or everything is the Jews. I think that's also incorrect. Like when you say everything is one thing, it's like, I think in America we have this tendency to simplify things into black and white. Oh, there's a good guy and a bad guy. It's so much more complex than that.
yeah,
And so when we're looking at the role of the
yeah.
crown, and we look at the map that we showed, the British crown, the city of London, right? And one thing I have understood is that it seems like the city of London seems to be the head of the banking snake, right? The banking empire, which, in my opinion, has been critical in this global control, right? If you control the money, you control everything. That so much this does go back into the city
Yeah.
of London and the Bank of England, and which you trace back into. You have the famous, the Rothschilds and all these different wealthy banking families. So, but as that ties in, so a lot of people are very focused on Israel, but do you think that Israel is really just a pawn being controlled by the British crown? Like if you look at how Israel even goes back, even the Balfour Declaration, going back into the Rothschilds, look at the Rothschilds being, really centered on the city of London. So do you think that a lot of this information does end up kind of pointing back to the British crown? And do you think that Israel is acting independent of the British crown, or are they just another pawn that's also being controlled by the city of London with this long-term goal of bringing America back under the control of the crown? I know that I threw a lot of things at
Mm.
you, but how maybe you can help me simplify some of this stuff.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and your question is super clear to me. And I do think that Israel is this. How should I say this? Okay, I'll approach because I could approach it in a number of ways, but I'll do it this way. The Rothschilds, who did play a role, a big role in buying up a big chunk of Palestine and playing a big role. They played a big role in financing the movement of Jewish families into the Middle East before even Israel was established as a state. They never lived in Israel. So the actual Rothschild family, the leading family members, never at any point chose to live in this region of the globe, which is geographically the intersecting zone, geographically speaking, of all of the ancient civilizations of the world, from Asia and Russia and Africa and Europe and Central Asia, all sort of converge in this pivot. What Halford Mackinder, the founder of modern geopolitics, called the world island, that center. He made the point whoever could control that center could control the world. And I think that going back to even the days of Julian the Apostate and the leading grand strategists of the Roman Empire, they saw that region for um, that from that lens. On the one hand, on a higher lens, because I mean, whoever could keep that region destabilized, who can control it, could prevent the potential collusion of various civilization states from working together. And the empire always thrives on divide to conquer. Get people of different civilizations to go into a state mentally of hating on the other and of believing that their only course of action to relating with their neighbors is to fight for whatever, jihad or whatever reason, territory, lumber, whatever. There's always going to be a reason to initiate conflict. So divide to conquer. On the other hand, on a deeper hand, I think that the founders of modern Zionism, as we know it, it's not an a very old ideology, like the form that it takes under people like Benjamin Netanyahu or his father, who was the personal secretary to Vladimir Jabotinsky, who ran the Irgun, night raids, and was, David Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, called Vladimir Jabotinsky Vladimir Hitler, because he's like, look, this guy is modeling himself on Hitler's program, except that he's not allowed, and he even offered to become a member of the Hitler Nazi party, except Hitler said no because you're a Jew. So, but otherwise, Ben Gurion said there's not that much difference between your approach and the fascist approach of Europe as far as trying to impose a hierarchy of Übermenschen on reigning over Untermenschen, over better humans over underhumans, as an organizing principle, including your use of terrorism that you think is valid if it's for the sake of a just cause. So his Irgun night raids that involved, like things like the My Lai massacre that was done later on in Vietnam was already being done by the Jabotinsky night raids that were targeting whole communities, families. And inversely, the Muslim Brotherhood, which, by the way, were also being created by the British Empire through British Freemasonic outfits, which is completely documented. The Muslim Brotherhood from 1928, when Al-Banna was set up to create it, was a British Freemasonic front group designed to also collude on an esoteric level with the Jabotinsky groups in killing Jewish settlers before Israel was created, in order to inflame hostilities that would then demand an eye for an eye revanchism, as the French call it, revengism, for this multi-generational sort of hostility. So if you look at a lot of the founders of modern Zionism in that form, you'll have to look to people like, and this is again recognized, Lord Shaftesbury, the cousin of Lord Palmerston, who ran the British Empire, was the prime minister at the worst times, who oversaw the British Empire during the American Civil War, and who put all of his efforts into breaking up the Union by providing British support to the Confederacy, the slave power, to have warships made by Britain, logistics, monetary support to break up the Union, to create, a divide to conquer thing, right? To destroy the enemy from within. That Lord Shaftesbury was known as the world's first modern Zionist. And the guy himself was an anti-Semite. He didn't respect the Jews, but yet he devoted himself to the cause of creating a new ideology that would proselytize amongst especially the Eastern European and Russian Jews, which he sent delegations and whole missionary schools to go and convince the Jews that it's their destiny to go and leave their ancient homelands of Europe and go and live in the desert. But he hated the Jews. So it's like, why did he do that? And then you look at the people who co-signed the Balfour Accords, Lord Balfour just being one, but you had Lord Milner was a co-author of the Balfour Accords with, what's his name? Leo Amory. Lord Balfour, Leo Amory were openly pro-fascist, hostile anti-Semites. So it's like, why did they devote themselves to the cause of creating a Jewish state? They were devoted only to the Church of the British Empire. So did they have maybe a duplicitous motive? I would say certainly. So the way I see it, when I look at Israel, on the one hand, I see something that had served a purpose. And I mean, you have to think, we are used to, you and I, and we're born into this society, which was already being it was already being manipulated before you and I were born into it. And as everybody listening, right, it's not all on us, but it's like there's a lot of encouragement by the cultural and economic and educational standards that we were trained by, to think very short termism. Maybe, think next year, maybe, or think maybe about our kids' university when we put a little money aside. Most people can't even think that far because the economy is so crap. They could think maybe moment to moment, paycheck to paycheck. But the oligarchy thinks in terms of ages. They think in terms of millennial ages. And so it takes some effort to train the mind to think on that level. This goes even beyond communism, as far as I could see it. Like, this communism was created in the destructive fashion we know it. Karl Marx and Engels authored their Das Kapital in 1865, volume 1, volume 2, 1868, volume 3, 1870. This thing goes, they're thinking ages. So when I'm looking at Israel, I'm looking at a Henry Kissinger had said when he was asked in 2012 by an Israeli newspaper, what do you see for Israel's future in 10 years? This is 2012. And he said, this knight of the Order of St. George and St. Michael of the British Empire, this Sir Henry Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State of the United Nations, said in 10 years, there will be no Israel. Now we're a little bit above that. We've passed that deadline. However, he confused the journalist when he said that. It was like, can you please expand on what you're saying? Didn't you devote your career towards the cause of Zionism? Like, why are you saying what you're saying? And he just repeated himself. So I think he knew the joke that the journalist didn't understand, which is that Israel serves a purpose within, but it's not an end unto itself. And I think when you look at the greater Israel ideology, which people like Sir Charles Warren, the Grand Master Freemason of the Quatuor Coronati Lodge, which worked with King Edward VII, who was like, you know, one of the most vicious kings and grand strategists of the world, who did probably the most to organize World War I, to kick over the chessboard and prevent the spread of the American system of republicanism around the world. That King Edward VII, who worked with Charles Warren, who also oversaw the Jack the Ripper murders, and I think it was connected, and that's a whole other topic. But Charles Warren made the point that we need to reconstruct Solomon's temple. He was saying this in the 1860s, 1870s, when he was doing his Freemasonic rituals under Solomon's mines that he was excavating, because they have a belief amongst his inner esoteric circle that the idea of what Solomon's temple meant is not what it says in the Bible, in the Old Testament. In the minds of the oligarchy, of which Charles Warren was a leading official member, it seems to me, and I've read their writings on this topic, they believe it's a central node of a world high priesthood of global mass human sacrifice. I mean, to a certain degree, you see it alluded to within the Old Testament, though Solomon is a much more sympathetic man than the Solomon that they believe in. But still, it's acknowledged that Solomon, at his weaker moments, did start worshiping Baal and you know, Moloch, his weaker moments when he was appeasing his wives, his many wives, and that to worship Moloch means you're killing kids. That was the point of Moloch worship, is you're putting children on a fiery altar, usually your firstborn, in order for the gods to give you things that you want. And that was what I think that the oligarchy has been obsessed with since the advent of Christianity, is to undo the disruptive nature of Christianity and principled. Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's a 19th century etching of a very well described and documented practice of Moloch that your audience is now looking at, which is typically a steel, or there was some form, maybe not steel, might have been iron or some other element that was made very hot through the furnace. And it was like a Sunday sacred practice to go there, listen to a sermon, and watch the high priesthood take a child that was gifted to Moloch to be burned alive. And they did this a lot. And in the minds of Charles Warren and King Edward VII, that was the sixth satanic spiritual meaning of that region of the Middle East that they wanted to revive around Solomon's temple, which also involved, in their mind, the Dome of the Rock, which is today under a mosque, but it's the fabled area where Abraham was mandated to sacrifice his son, and God sent down the angel to say, hey, don't do that anymore, we're over that now. But that rock is the rock that's under the Dome of the Rock, and it still exists today. And that's something that many of the Benjamin Netanyahu greater Israel fanatics want to blow up and turn into a new Zionist site, a sacred site. And in Charles Warren's writings on the topic, and I say Charles Warren because he's so important and people don't realize how important this guy is, but he's so important. Him, as well as Sir Francis Burton, who was another high level Freemasonic Rosicrucian who worked closely with this guy and who trained and inspired Aleister Crowley, the big Satanist of the 20th century. they both believed that, oh, there it is. Sir Charles Warren. That's him right there. Head of the Metropolitan Police during the Jack the Ripper murders, which I go through in one of volume 3 of my Revenge of the Mystery Cults. And as it says, even on Wikipedia, he advanced the Temple Mount movement, which is really a driving force behind Netanyahu today.
Which it's kind of strange on his comment
Yeah,
on,
yeah, I see you want to say something.
yeah,
Yeah.
even this brief description here of him. It's like, okay, so he was a British Army officer of the Royal Engineers. He was one of the earliest European archaeologists of the biblical Holy Land, and particularly the Temple Mount. And he was previously the commissioner of the police of the metropolis, the head of the London Metropolitan Police during the Jack the Ripper murders. It's like, this is a really strange background. This guy's he's the head of police, and he's also an archaeologist focused on the biblical Holy Land. Again, just strange, piecing these things together. But, so one thing that's going to make sure I'm kind of following you here, what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that almost nothing is as it seems, right? Like you can't look at even Israel, right, which is older than most of our younger than most of our grandparents. That it's not as simple as it seems. That actually these things go back generations, and that's what I like about I've again I mentioned studying China, CCP, but also just Chinese history. Like I'm fascinated with the 5,000-year Chinese history to the point that my wife and I have watched like the 100-episode kind of epic of the Three Kingdoms, right? Where you're watching amazing historical things happening, and you see that.
Oh, I watched that too. I watched that too on YouTube, and I watched all of
the YouTube
like
one,
90 or 100 episodes. Yeah, it was pretty well done. Yeah,
exactly. But what you see though is that like Cao Cao, for instance, or some of these leaders, they're not trying to gain power that they're going to keep for their generation. They're looking at, okay, how can I, over the next 5 generations, take control of this particular region? And so their whole purpose might just be to raise the one son that carries on the next step of the plan. And I think that's what you also see with these royal families is that, we look at things now, it's like, Prime delivery is not available tomorrow. Okay, I'll go somewhere else if I can't get my package tomorrow. Like we're so like this fast food nation, like everything's instant that we can't even plan for 10 years, let alone 10 generations, which if you trace these bloodlines, you see that that's been part of their overall strategy is this long-term planning where you mentioned, planning over millennia. So what I'm gathering from, some things that you're saying is that even the modern day Israel as we know it, you can't look at it in isolation. Going back, you mentioned even some of the founders, right, that signed off on the founding of Israel were anti-Semitic, right? That they hated the Jews, and so it's what I'm gathering here is that even modern day Israel, Mossad, the CIA, these intelligence agencies, that a lot of this does tie back into the city of London, into the global banking cartels, into these families, these bloodline families that have long since ruled the earth. A lot of their beliefs and practices go back to biblical times and before, right? Where you see that some of these, whether it's the synagogue of Satan or the worship of Moloch, the sacrificing of children, that you can't just look at it and say, oh, these kind of these satanic elites that they like to sacrifice kids. It's like, well, that's been happening since the beginning of time, right? So this is a much bigger and longer story that we're just in the last chapter or the second to last chapter of a 100-chapter book, and we can't understand what's happening in this chapter without understanding what happened in chapter 50 or chapter 3. And so anyway, I'm just kind of making sure I'm following along here.
Absolutely. No, I context is so important. It's so important. And I appreciate so much what you just said because so many people want to try to get the easy answer without doing the work of thinking about the color, the topography of these ancient dynamics. Things that happened thousands of years ago have more bearing in some measure on what's happening to us right now than things that happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago, And I think, yeah, like when you look at a lot of the leading core families at the inner echelons, from those that we can gather at least, I just went to Rome with my wife a few weeks ago, and it was cool. There's a lot of beauty in Rome, but there's something off too, right? Like I don't know if you've ever been to Rome. Have you been to Rome? Yeah.
No, I've been
So,
a lot of Europe, but not Rome.
okay. It was our first experience there, and we spent 2 weeks, and we saw as much as we could, the Vatican City. We spent a lot of time there, the Vatican Museum, the old palazzos, many of them double as ancient museums, a lot of ancient sites too. But got to the Barberini Palazzo and the Orsini's, and I mean there's so many fascinating things that showcase, on the one hand, a high level of human accomplishment and beauty when you look at some of the architectural miracles that were pulled off. It's great. But then there's this evidence of a clash of something satanic, something that was also co-opting and turning that against the humanity as well. And there's obelisks everywhere. There's demonic imagery in your face, and people don't even want to look at it. Maybe because for people who are Italians living there, it's just too much of a reminder that there's this oppressive force subtly just sort of always there. It's almost a suffocating reminder of this ancient power that never disappeared. And you got these old families, some of them that can date themselves back to the Emperor Claudius and Vespasians and the leading families of the Roman patrician class, and even before that. Um, they never disappeared. There does seem to be something amongst the oligarchical cultures that, as an organizing principle, presumes that most of human beings have to remain subservient to the status of talking cow as as an underhuman slave class of slave families, while the superior bloodlines are privileged to be able to access a deeper, wider spectrum of their capabilities mentally, at least. But there's something unnatural about that too, because that's not the way human beings were made, right? Like, humans are made in the image of God. We all have an equal claim to inalienable rights. And the oligarchy is very offended by that presumption. And though they can't necessarily put that genie back in the bottle, because the revolution of 1776 did happen, what they can do is thus corrupt it and infiltrate it from within, so that we forget the meaning of what that even is. So people could say the word, yeah, we're made in the living image of God, but they don't understand why that's true. They just believe it without foundation, and thus it can be easily undermined. And John Quincy Adams, I think, said it really well, that we must never allow ourselves to go off searching for monsters to destroy, because as soon as we allow ourselves into that crusader mindset of going into wars beyond our borders, we lose ourselves, we lose our soul, and we lose the humility that is necessary to to be sovereign. We always have to be humble. We can't be so prideful and boastful that we can say that we have to go and go to war with another people's based upon how great we think we are and virtuous we think we are, which is what made the Crusaders so dumb and useful idiots back 1,000 years ago, that they went along with this forever war strategy initiated by these satanic high priests, masquerading some often as Christian, but they were never Christian in their heart. They were satanic, that were within Venice, within Rome, even within Constantinople, I would say, in the 11th century, 12th, 13th century, that got clashes of civilizations forever. And that's what, the Trotskyists, ironically, the communist Trotskyists that were funded by the Schiffs and the Warburgs and the Wall Street London, billionaire, trillionaire class of the pre-World War I. These are the same figures, followers of Trotsky, who founded the neoconservative movement. People like James Burnham, Trotsky's personal assistant, became the founder of modern neoconservatism in 1940. Albert Volstetter, another former Trotskyist, became a leading neocon as he became the grand strategist of Rand Corporation, starting in the late 40s, all the way up through the 1960s and 70s. That worked to infiltrate the USA, infiltrate especially the Republican Party, to convert it more and more from the party of Lincoln and McKinley into the party of empire of Dick Cheney, right? So it was subtle, but it happened, and it was premised on the revival of the Crusader tradition that Samuel P. Huntington of the Trilateral Commission put into words when he called in the 1970s for a clash of civilizations. And again, that wasn't an original thesis by Samuel P. Huntington, who was an assistant to Zbigniew Brzezinski and a friend of Henry Kissinger, both within the Trilateral Commission. He was basically just simply rehashing the thesis of Sir Bernard Lewis, the British Orientalist of MI6, who had put forth the Arc of Crisis thesis in the early 60s. That was then just plagiarized, probably by intention and cooperation by Huntington, to make it seem American as a design, but it was never that at all. It was always British. So I think that the idea of the British was to convert the USA, especially over the dead bodies of JFK and Bobby Kennedy, into the dumb giant, the useful sort of, marcher lord of the British Empire, kind of like what Persia became after the Babylonian priesthood took control of Persia and started using it as a better enforcer of their will to power over the ancient world. It was never Persia making its own designs. It was, I think, this Babylonian priesthood that then decided, when Persia was defeated by Alexander the Great, that they needed to find better fertile soil, which they saw in Rome. And they made that their new focus, to make that the epicenter of their world empire, to have an ideal of enslaving the world under a high priesthood of mass that would utilize mass sacrifice, very unhuman, sacrilegious mode of worshiping your idea of God. And it didn't, it ultimately petered out, largely because of the efforts of some very courageous early Christians that didn't want to go along with that type of ethos. And at a certain point, after the empire had weakened and expanded beyond its ability to sustain itself, it broke up into two parts, with the Western Empire collapsing, and those leading patrician families migrated like a slime mold into the more geopolitically useful areas. Some stayed in Rome, others went to Venice, others to Amalfi. That gave rise to the city-state fake republics. Genoa became another one, which dominated and controlled this forever clash of civilizations. They're the ones who spawned these satanic secret societies, like the Templars, like the Knights of Malta, like those two sister organizations were very close together, never collaborators. I think left-hand, right-hand path to the same thing. Later on, the Teutonic Knights were a subsidiary of the Knights Templar for the Germanic race. You had versions for Portugal and Spain, but they all had the same sort of mandate, and they never disappeared. Even after the Crusades came to an end, they sort of rebranded themselves and continued to operate under the surface, and yet profoundly misshaping the human experience by initiating so many assassinations of great leaders, wars, unnecessary ones always. And to this very day, you look at it, look at this is what spawned the Jesuit order. This is what spawned the Anglican order in 1534. This is what spawned the Knights of Malta, which are the rebranded Knights Hospitaller, the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem that was created to oversee the Crusades. It's the same thing. The Knights Templar, as Albert Pike said, with pride, is that the Knights Templars were rebranded into the Jesuits. And I think he's right. In my research, it's true. It is the same thing. And they've infiltrated and work in tandem with each other to get nations into false oppositions, dichotomies that would be controlled left-right dualisms, to then forget the principle and instead fight over some left-right idea of what people think the argument is, free market versus statism or something. And it's overly simplistic, bottom up versus top down, let's fight. And it's not like that. There's something that's being out by design of that dispute. And the oligarchy is laughing at us when we allow ourselves to get caught in that, because John F. Kennedy and Lincoln and McKinley didn't have that problem. Do we do things top down? Do we do things with the nation state? Or do we do things bottom up, based upon only the people's will individually? And it's like, well, it's a bit of both at the same time. It's not one or the other. You don't have to make that dichotomy.
Yeah, it's that same black,
that's my
white,
concern today.
Right? It's that same kind of simplification of that. And so kind of coming full circle, right? Because this is very helpful historical context to look at this overall chess game and this moving around. And so what we have right now is, obviously, we have this interesting news bit of Trump, and the British Commonwealth, which has unsettled a lot of people, rightfully so. But how do you tie that into Trump all of a sudden, this new idea of making Canada part of the United States, making Greenland the part of the United States? There's a lot of people that have talked about the North American Union. They'd looked into the different, like the 10 regions. So how does that all fit into this? Because it's like, a lot of people think that, oh, well, if Trump can negotiate and get Canada to join America, well, it's like he'd have to be negotiating with the British Crown, right? Because as you've put out, it's like it's a little bit of a psyop to think that Canada is not controlled by the British Crown. And so how do you make sense of all of these things that have happened just in the past couple of months?
Okay, well, you notice that our new prime minister, unelected, he might get elected in the sense that I think he's going to be calling an election pretty soon in Canada. Mark Carney is a major international central banker. He's also on the Bilderberger steering committee member. He's a World Economic Forum trustee. But I think most notably for me, at least, is that he's also a member of the Knight. He's a Knight of the Order of Malta, which is the Knights Hospitaller. It's the sister order to the Templars, and so is Eric Prince. So are many of the infiltrators who have been trying to co-opt MAGA into and convert the MAGA movement, which I believe is a legitimate patriotic movement, probably the only hope for saving the republic or humanity, is located in large measure within the MAGA movement. But there's been an effort to infiltrate and co-opt it, nudge it towards a re-identity, a rebranding into a reactionary crusader force, which is being, I think, overseen by a high priesthood of Gnostic, satanic cultists who act Christian, but they're not. It's like the Church of Satan. It's not the synagogue of Satan in this case, but they work with Satanists who act like Jews but are not, and Satanists who act like Muslims but they're not. Their primary identity is Satanists, and they work together, kind of like the Templars are renowned for having collaborated with for centuries, the order of the Israeli Nizari Ismailis that came to be known as the Assassins, or Hashashins, because they were hashish smokers that would go into an altered state when they would carry out their assassinations of targets. And there was a hypnotic induction, mystery cult initiation process. And in large measure, the Templars were known to have even taken many of their rituals from the Hashashins, including their base of operations under the Temple of Solomon, which was the the home base of the Knights Templars, for a couple of centuries, even after the Kingdom of Jerusalem was created as the base of this forever war between religions. So again, you had collaborations where the Nizari Ismailis, who today are run by the Aga Khan number 4, were back then, a millennium ago, killing the enemies of the Crusader Templars, and the Templars were assassinating the enemies of the Nizari Ismailis. They were collaborating. Saladin, who survived 2 assassination attempts in his life, even had his soldiers capture a few of these assassins, and they admitted that, and that's been on the public record for 1,000 years. So you have this collusion amongst Satanists acting like they are righteous, whatever the target religion is that they want to infiltrate, to get the nation, to get that target religion to self-destruct under its own ego. They profiled they're very good at profiling target audiences to get the audience to become their own enemy. This is what Shakespeare is also exposing in how this works in Othello. If people read or watch a good rendition of Othello, Shakespeare showcasing how the enemy, which is Iago, the Venetian grand strategist, is infiltrating and winning the hearts and trust of his targets, who he wants to have destroy themselves. Othello, Desdemona, Othello's best friend, who all commit self-annihilation by the end of the thing.
So just a quick
Shakespeare's
point.
showing.
I just want to make sure I'm catching up with you. Yeah. So basically what you're saying is that, contemporarily, that there's the MAGA movement, which you're saying is this very powerful force. And I agree. I think it is a populist movement. The core of it is just a collection of individuals that have collectively said, look, our country's really off. We need to go back to its founding, back to the principles of 1776. We need to dismantle this modern deep state that has grown into this huge apparatus. And so that's, I think, is genuine. And that's where I think the real power lies, that the elites are the most scared of, is the collective, right? When you have enough people that collectively point at them and say, you're the enemy, not my neighbor with the Biden sign. But what you're saying, though, is that actually that a lot of this MAGA movement has been co-opted by Satanists. Am I correct in hearing that?
Yeah, I think that there's and when I say that, I don't say that word loosely. I don't throw that around fancifully. I do think that the inner core, the esoteric inner elite of the Templars, the Jesuits, at the higher ups. I'm not talking about the lower order, uninitiated, members of the Order of Malta or Templars or Freemasons or Jesuits. I'm not saying that they're all in the big joke. I'm not saying that. I know some people who are Freemasons and are Jesuits and are members of the Order of Malta, and they're not bad people. They're good people, but there's an initiatory degree system built into those structures. And the evidence I've looked at tells me that at the inner orders, at the esoteric intersection, there is an awareness that it's the inside out game. Everything that you thought was the good is the bad, and the bad is the good, the up is the down, and the down is the up, and the sacred is actually the profane. And there's a certain set of practices that are passed down to groom next generation, multi-generational conspiracies of personality types that will be broken of their humanity, ideally to as young of an age as possible, in order to be reconstructed with a new type of fanatical ethos and aesthetical value that will judge ugly as beauty, evil as good, right? And there's a way that seems to be done with the help of various hypnotic techniques, drugs, practices
SRA.
that merge opposite. Yeah, you got it. So, yeah, I think that the Knights of Malta are one of the core bad apples. And I think, earlier on when we began our conversation, I was bringing up Coudenhove-Kalergi, member of the Order of Malta, along with Otto von Habsburg and many of the leading families, including the Thurn-und-Taxis family, which is still very powerful. There you go. You read my mind. So that's the first quote of two that actually my wife pulled these out of this book called An Idea Conquers the World, written in 1954 by Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi, describing the foundation of a world set up by pan regional fascist organizations. He had an idea of a pan-Europa. That was his pan-European movement that he set up in the early 20s, became the foundation of what became the European Union. He had an idea for North America, of a North American Union, an
I
idea
can
for
read this real quick,
different parts of the
actually.
world
I
that,
know it's bigger on my screen. Let me
yeah, sure.
read this real quick. It says, I was
Yeah, go
aware from
ahead.
the
Yeah.
start that the main obstacle to the unification of Europe would be the British question. For whilst on the one hand, the British Isles are an essential part of Europe, they are also the nerve center of a worldwide empire extending over 5 continents. This special position makes it very difficult for Britain to tie herself exclusively to Europe. A union of Great Britain with Pan Europe might cause Canada to secede from the empire and join Pan America, with all the incalculable consequences such a move would entail for the political and economic unity of the empire. Only one solution seemed possible, and this was a complicated and difficult one: a united continent working in close cooperation with Great Britain and her empire. Clearly, Pan Europe and the empire could not afford to pursue separate policies toward the rest of the world. Europe's purpose could be achieved by associating Britain with the European system without making her part of it.
Yep. Yep, that's a big one. So he's laying it out pretty concretely in 1954 of what his idea is for the template of how the world could move into a one world government. But he goes a little bit further in the next quote that I sent you. So maybe you could read that one too. I think it follows up pretty nicely
Let's
from
see.
this. No, no, go back. Go back. There's one more quote from Coudenhove-Kalergi. Maybe before
I'll
that.
open it real quick. Is different.
Oh, oh, maybe I didn't send it to you. If I didn't, that's okay. We can just look at the image of the North American
Here
Union
you
in
go.
red. How about that? Oh, here we
It
go.
is.
Yeah,
It says,
read that quote
"Yep,
right there.
had wishful thinking influenced my program, I should certainly have suggested as a European Union under British leadership, the King of England acting as hereditary President of the United States of Europe. But alas, the problem was much more complicated than it seemed. In fact, the British question was the most difficult and delicate problem of all the complicated problems confronting Pan Europe. England was looking toward a new organization of its imperial unity that it could not and would not imperil by any European entanglements. After all, Canada was American, South Africa, African, Australia, Australian, and India, Asiatic, and together they formed with Britain the greatest empire of all history."
Yeah, right
There it
there.
is.
So Um, yeah, there it is. That's sort of the outline. And again, his movement is probably more powerful today in many ways than people realize, more than even when he was alive. And if you look at people like Mario Draghi, who also was very close, worked very closely with Mark Carney in establishing the bail-in mechanism, oversaw much of what became the European Union, the Lisbon Treaty, that centralized, that tried to create sort of a North uh, a United States of Europe, but without the authenticity of the United States of America, because it was all premised around the idea of a hereditary order of control systems, as he calls for, of a British Empire being in the controlling managerial position of this pan-Europa, merged with a North American union, largely through the assistance of Canada. He's got this thing kind of gamed out a little bit. That this is literally what's being pushed forth right now as we speak, with the idea of consolidating under the European Commission, a European banking structure that could have more control without the opposition of sovereign nations of Europe that try to have a say in the destiny of Europe as a whole, with the idea that Russia has to be destroyed because that's the biggest, worst thing in the world is Russia. So we have to give up our personal freedoms to unify around destroying Europe, Russia. So it's all a fraud. But Carney is very, very deeply baked into that. And so if you show the other image based on what was just said by Coudenhove-Kalergi, and let's show the image of the North American Union, which is an idea first put forth, the North American Technate, the Technate of America, which is a 1933 image that was drafted from the Technocracy Incorporated, an organization that grew out of the World Technical Alliance of the New School of Social Research under Thorsten Veblen and John Dewey, two Fabian Society anti-humanists that had infiltrated the United States. Also occultists. I think they were taught by William James, the American president of the Society of Psychical Research, the society that was set up by the British to try to normalize paranormal, psychic, and other types of ghostly phenomenon and make it part of the human, like the zeitgeist. So that Society of Psychical Research was what William James set up in Harvard in America in the 19th century. This is what he taught as a doctrine of occultism to his students, of which John Dewey was a leading member. This is what was set up by Dewey when he created a subgroup within Columbia University that broke out and became New School of Social Research. This is what the Technical Alliance was created to serve in 1921 or 1920 under Thorsten Veblen, who was also working with leading members of the Frankfurt School of George Lukács and the Galileo Circle, that was trying to put forth a thesis to reset human civilization around this idea that we could be brought to a state of existential despair and hopelessness, at which point we could be given a shock that would break us of all of our traditions, belief in God, family, nation, and thus embrace a new type of human that had never existed before, which is what the Frankfurt School was set up to do with these creatures who were forming what became the Technocracy Incorporated, the mechanization of human society around a social engineering master elite. And so Howard Scott, who was a student of Veblen, set up this Technocracy Incorporated to solve the Great Depression, get rid of governments, get rid of business, get rid of private ownership. And he said that, he's probably, I mean, this guy was more fascist than anybody that's ever existed. And his organization was illegalized in World War II at the very beginning. The head of the Canadian branch of Technocracy Inc. was a man named Joshua Haldeman, who later on was known as Elon Musk's grandfather, and who devoted himself to this cause of creating a union, a centralized union of technocrats, of technicians that would embrace Greenland, Canada, the USA, all the way down to the Darien Gap and even northern parts of South America as one technate. And that would be a fascist technate, which I don't think they could have done that peacefully, even though they said that they want to do this all for peaceful means in their public writings. The fact was that I think it was understood that Mexico and all of the other nations of Latin America were not going to simply just lay down without a fight. It was probably going to require a military war to go in and invade and take control of those regions, which would mean a lot of dead people before this centralized system could be brought into play. I've seen a lot of evidence that shows me, and I know a lot of people might not like what I'm going to say because they really have a heroic image of Elon Musk as the coolest guy in the world. But I think a lot of that's just branding personally. And I think that the ideas of his grandfather are very much alive in the form of Elon, including how, if you want to be a member of Technocracy Inc., all members had to they had to get rid of their names and change it for a series of numbers and X's in their names, including Joshua Haldeman, which had a series of numbers and X's
And Elon's
that
son.
Elon even chose. That's the thing, right?
Wow. So
And Elon even,
let
yeah,
me
sorry. So yeah, go
no
ahead.
no this no, no okay, so let me ask you a complex question of kind of piecing things together. Okay.
Mm, mm,
So with where we're at right now, looking at all these different pieces and looking at
mm,
Carney, right, who we who's now seemingly going to be the kind of taking over the control of Canada, looking at his
mm,
ties to the British Crown, to these secret societies, all this stuff. Okay, do you
mm.
think that do you think that Trump, and let's just I'm going to say Trump, we'll put him in the bucket of, say, presumed innocent, right? Maybe he's being taken advantage of, right? Okay, we'll for conversation's sake, we'll put him in that bucket, okay? But do you think that if you look at the amount of power that Elon has, right? Which, it's okay, great. Yeah, I love getting rid of corruption and everything, but I'm also kind of weary that part of this could be part of just dismantling the US government to say, look, it's so inefficient, it's so corrupted that we have to go to some technocracy or technology based system to run everything because we can't rely on these corrupt politicians. And so is like maybe part of the reason of Doge is doing that is actually destroying faith in the governance of America, period. So do you think that potentially that with this, what's happening with the United States potentially being part of the Commonwealth, with the acquisition of Canada, Greenland, with everything that Elon Musk is doing, that what this is leading towards is not America controlling Canada, but actually in some way Canada having greater influence over America through whatever merger, same with Greenland. And then this map right here, this tech native America being something that under Musk and his grandfather's previous ambitions, bringing in a technocratic society here, which might tie into Teal and some of these Palantir, and we go deep into the Silicon Valley rabbit holes of basically creating this tech native America that then would in some way actually then be subservient to the British crown? I mean, do you look at this as maybe potentially a bigger strategy of creating this technate and then bringing everything back under the fold of the British crown? As frightening as that all seems, I mean, I'm seeing that if I'm looking at the
That's my concern.
chessboard, it's like, well, if I was being objective and not, being okay, biased by hope or biased by, kind of positive belief and the good of humankind, you could see that, well,
Yeah.
maybe this is some sort of multi-generational long-term strategy. And even you mentioned Elon naming his son a series of numbers and letters, which is strange. But then actually, I hadn't heard that before, that to join the Technocratic Society, you had to take on a new name like that. Is everything I'm piecing together far-fetched, or is that something that could be potentially part of this bigger agenda?
Yeah, I mean, that's my concern, really. Like you said, I also am inclined to give Trump the benefit of the doubt as a person. And some of the better people around him, I really do want to give them, and I am giving them. I'm operating under the hypothesis that they mean really well, but they're being duped into a trap that would be best to avoid. And my concern, since the earliest moments when Trump was proposing making Canada the 51st state and everyone is getting all giddy and excited, I was warning that this might make the US more Canadian than Canada more American. And certainly when you look at Mark Carney, who has been gamed out, and it's been a plan to put him and replace, all worn out Justin Trudeau idiot for a number of years. It's already been a scenario that they've been putting forth for years already. They've been waiting for the right moment to put in Carney. He's very close to the architects of the North American Union. I mean, Not Lloyd, Thomas Axworthy. There's a network of privy counselors that created the Canada 2020 think tank, created in 2005, that installed Justin Trudeau, that groomed him. Diane Carney, his wife, is a research director, a leading figure controlling the Canada 2020 think tank. And these people on the Privy Council task force for the creation of a North American Union simply put that plan on the back burner, which is to create an Amaro for North America under the context that would require an economic collapse, to give an excuse to say we need something new to bring order back into the system. So, they put that on the back burner in 2007, when people were, I think, a little too resistant to giving up their freedoms, or 2008, they put it away, but they didn't give up on it. So I think that that's still in motion. And if that were to happen, it would certainly eliminate the majority of the factors, the elements of the US Constitution that make America a viable sovereign nation, by giving up to a higher centralized authority that would be located far removed from even North America itself, in order to maintain peace and stability, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I do think there's a bit of a sleight of hand happening right now to trip up the better patriots, maybe by getting them to think a little bit too robustly of how great they are, and avoid the weakness of what we've allowed the nature of the evil that we've allowed to consume. I think many Americans have been induced to stop evaluating or appreciating the nature of this evil that's infiltrated the social body of their own society over the dead bodies of JFK properly, to the point that they can't recognize where it is today, operating and controlling major functions of the US state, even now around Donald Trump directly, which could be playing a bit of a trick to reabsorb the USA back into its ancient nemesis. So again, that's part of what I see as one aspect of my role at the moment, at least, is to ring the alarm bell on that, and to try to help patriots in both Canada and the USA alike to sidestep these traps that a very sophisticated ancient force of evil has been laying, that thinks very longer term than most of the patriots that I know, who don't know how to think on those types of long arcs in a cogent manner, in order to really, because, I think we do have a chance to bring back the best spirits of 1776, but we have to be more sophisticated than thinking that World Wrestling Federation is the master key to solving grand strategy. That's not high culture. That's the reason why we're dumb, is that we've been led to believe that is culture, and that's not. That's what makes us worse people. And the oligarchy thinks on a much higher level than WWF wrestling.
Unless you're watching Idiocracy, and then it all makes sense.
And then it makes sense. Yeah.
Well, Matt, I think we should probably I think we've gone full circle.
Sure.
We've gone on for quite some time.
Yeah.
I know you have another interview or another show you're doing shortly, so I want to be mindful of your time and give you, time to prep for that. But before we sign off, I want to say a few things. And then also I want to I'll first bring attention to your Substack. So MatthewArrett.substack.com. I'll make sure that this link is in the description to the show. There's, as you can see just on your homepage here, there's a lot of stuff that is very relevant to what we're talking about. Elon Musk as Tesla 2.0, the legacy of Technocracy Inc. Back in 2024, you wrote that. The dystopian mission of Mark Carney. So a lot of what we're talking about is on your Substack, and just also to encourage people to follow you over on X. I'll put it's Arrett_Matthew, and it's your last name's EHRET. I'll put that in the link as well for the description for the show. But so I want to just kind of, coming full circle, what I've come to with this is that the solution to this, fundamentally, for those of us that are of that populist movement, that I hate, it's not even a Republican movement. It's just a populist movement of, we believe in the core values of this country, of the Constitution, of us as a constitutional republic, not a democracy, right? I hear Elon Musk talking about, oh, they're destroying our democracy. It's like, no, we're a constitutional republic. And it took me some time to understand that too. Like, I used to think, oh, America's a democracy, because that's what they want us to think. But I think that the key, though, is that we have to look back to the founding and look back to how the country was established, because how it was done in a way that it gave us freedom from the British Crown. And right now there's a lot of enemies. I think a lot of them do trace back to the City of London, to the banking cartels that want to bring America, first knock us down to our knees and bring us back under that system. And we have to collectively resist that. But also, the cost of liberty is eternal vigilance, right? The price of liberty, eternal vigilance. So we cannot allow ourselves to blindly worship anybody, right? Whether it's Trump, Elon Musk, Conor McGregor, it doesn't matter who it is. We have to be very vigilant and constantly measure our elected leaders, our local leaders, et cetera, against the founding documents of this country. And if we can't do that, we're lost. And that's where I come in terms of, okay, what can I do about this? And like that, it's that. Let's get back to that. So, do you have any closing thoughts as we're concluding here?
Now, those are really good closing thoughts, Seth. Yeah, I support everything you just said. And I think that, yeah, like at the end of the day, America has to do a lot of soul searching. Americans need to really like look inward right now and really evaluate the quality of the evil that we've permitted to seep into, and I would say Canadians, I'll include my fellow Canadians in that proposition too. We've tolerated the normalization of mediocrity and evil for many generations now, far too long. And unless we can really begin to look at, you can, an alcoholic can only start solving the problem once they admit that I'm an alcoholic, eat some humble pie, start making apologies, like look to the people that you've wronged. And America, Canada, we've wronged a lot of people. Like, we allowed the CIA, the military industrial complex, to use the resources of the nation to project power at the costs of millions and millions of lives, and wars that we should never have anything to do with in the Middle East, bombing nations that had nothing to do with 9/11, when in fact it seems as though the thing that had something to do with 9/11 was actually located in our own backyard. Vietnam, we wiped out whole villages of innocent people in the course of a war in Vietnam that was all based on a false flag of something that didn't even happen at the Gulf of Tonkin. We were lied to. There was no attack by the Viet Cong on the Gulf of Tonkin, but because we gave our acquiescence, our consent, we allowed millions of innocent victims to die there. Cambodia, Laos, and I mean, there's been, I think, over 200 wars. The expansion of U.S. military, there's 78 U.S. military bases all over Latin America that are just unchecked. 300, biolabs run by the CIA and the Pentagon, unchecked internationally. Nobody talks about that. And I mean, we've Africa, my God, it could be a beautiful blossoming renaissance of beauty and cooperation and hope if we hadn't killed Patrice Lumumba and overthrown so many leaders that loved their people, and Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso in the 80s. But we did that. We did that. That blood is on our hands. And because of that, and we installed, controlled puppets to privatize everything for mining conglomerates of, Barrick Gold and Chevron and De Beers and other things, Lawn Ho. Now we've got a situation of chaos on earth. We've brought ourselves to a breaking point. We've allowed this oligarchy to consolidate power under BlackRock and a few hands that are tied to a sociopathic ancient order of high priesthood Satanists that are really obsessed with killing everybody and ushering in a new age of Horus. Like, great, so
there's your summary.
Let's do something. Yeah. So let's do something really about like pulling our heads out of our asses and thinking about how can we get good again, and think about the best of our times when we didn't suck, when we were really something that was worth being proud of, and emulating those past experiences of how we fought empire, how we did the good and acted in accordance of the principles of man made in the living image of God. And we got a limited window of opportunity to have these kinds of conversations, because pretty soon it's going to snap and we won't be able to talk about this, and we'll be too busy fighting for like surviving amidst a total shock therapy dark age, and that's not going to be good. So let's do it now. Yeah, that's my
busy
final word.
shooting drones out of the sky.
Yeah, right. With rocks and slingshots.
Exactly. Well, Matt, thank you again for your time. I know it's late for you, and I appreciate you staying up for this. I'll make sure again that your links are in the description for the show. And we'll do this again. I've still got a huge list of questions that we didn't even get to, so we'll do that in next round. So thank you again. It's such a pleasure speaking with you.
All right, you too. All right, bye.
America is under siege. You've seen the headlines: terror attacks, chaos, and whispers of coordinated threats. Intelligence insiders and whistleblowers are sounding the alarm. For years, the border's been wide open, allowing dangerous groups of terrorists, cartels, even foreign soldiers to infiltrate our nation. The deep state doesn't want you prepared, And even with Trump coming back in charge, smooth sailing certainly is not guaranteed. Experts are warning us disruptions are coming, chaos is just around the corner. Think about it. What would you do if another pandemic hits? Or if our grid goes dark? Or if coordinated attacks erupt across our country overnight? Right now is the time to act while you still can. Your family's survival depends on having a secure food supply. That is why Heaven's Harvest exists. Heaven's Harvest offers the highest quality, long term storable food, delicious, nutritious, and designed to last up to 25 years. Imagine the peace of mind knowing that you have 3, 6, or even 12 months of food ready for any emergency. Don't wait for the shelves to go empty or for the next attack to catch you off guard. Take control now. Go to heavensharvest.com and secure your supply. Use promo code SETH, that's SETH, for an exclusive 15% discount on your entire order. Picture this: your family is safe, secure, and well fed while chaos unfolds outside. That security starts today. Heaven's Harvest, because tomorrow isn't promised. Protect your family by preparing today. Visit heavensharvest.com right now and use promo code SETH to save 15% off. Don't wait until it's too late. Your family is depending on you. Numbers don't lie. The impact that Balance of Nature makes every single day is astounding. You can see the numbers for yourself at their website, balanceofnature.com. So listen to these stats concerning Balance of Nature's worldwide success. More than 1,000 success stories are reported each month. Hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide. Millions of orders delivered each year. And billions, yes, billions of fruits and veggie supplements consumed by people who've decided to start living better. There's only one number missing. That's you. Do what I did and add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature's whole food supplements, like so many others around the world. Here's another number that should get your attention: 35%. Use my discount code SETH to get 35% off, plus free shipping and their money-back guarantee. You must use my discount code SETH. So call them at 800-2468-751 and use the discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 35% off plus free shipping.